Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our first fall edition here of the MC Scow Happy Hour. Glad to be with everybody. It's, I guess, 8 o'clock here on the East Coast, 7 in Midwest time. And we're glad to have you here tonight. And for the next screen, here with my buddy, Eric Doyle, who's, I think he's in Minnesota right now. Eric, you with us?
Hey, Al. Yep, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, all good. And, I'm sure all you guys are out that way. I've seen Eric sailing in Lake Minnetonka and doing a bunch of A-boats and some other stuff, and glad to have Eric back here to chat some MCs after a good summer that we've had, and looking forward to it. So what have you been up to, Eric? Anything good?
Oh, all kinds of stuff. Not much Scows lately. Everybody kind of put the boats away, but I was in San Diego for the Etchells North Americans. That was good fun. And then a little training over in Switzerland for the Star Sailors League Gold Cup. A bunch of young guys that beat me up on the boat all week. A little sore, a little stiff, but it was a lot of fun. So
nice.
Good to be back in Minnetonka here for a little while.
Yeah, I'm sure it's starting to get cold there, right? So
a little bit, but not too bad. Not too
cool.
bad.
Well, before we keep going, we'll do our usual plug here that, if you're not a member of the MC Scout class, we urge you to do it. The class has done a good job this year supporting the class and doing things and running clinics and doing all kinds of stuff and doing everything they can to support the sailors. So if you have a moment, you haven't joined, I think maybe I'm misspeaking here and I'll get corrected later, but I'm pretty sure even if you haven't joined for, last year, you can start joining for next year and doing that. And there's a lot of good things going on with the class and people are excited, and we've had a really good summer of sailing and getting ready to kick off the winter season here, and it's good. So if you have time, get on the website, check it out, pay your class dues, and go forward here. So we're thinking about what to chat about here tonight. And again, we're not having a super long webinar, maybe 30, 45 minutes, something like that. But we want to talk about, we had a bunch of big and good regattas here through the summer and into the fall here. We've learned quite a few things. I've done a few regattas and got some good results with new sail, which we're really excited about. And, there's been some tuning and some trim stuff. And Eric and I have been kind of going back and forth chatting about it. And we're like, some of the stuff we should talk about with the group. So I think it's really important that we talk about it, especially as we're all getting ready to go to Eustis here in a few weeks and go down there and do some sailing, hang out at the oyster trough and that type of fun stuff. So yeah, we'll talk about 3 regattas, and Eric and I are going to bat some ideas around. And, as I said, if you have questions, feel free to stop us. You can put it in the chat box and we'll be glad to answer them. And, we're pretty excited about all this stuff. So we'll roll into it here and chat a little bit about the Inland Championship, which was an awesome regatta this summer. This is a picture from the event. And the one good part about it is Eric's been around at a few events and there was actually wind at that regatta for the whole week. It was awesome. So we got to sail in some wind and do some things, but there was a couple important lessons that I think we wanted to bat around here. And one was coaching and practice, which I wanted to kick off here with, and Eric and I can talk about. So we had a coach for the first day of the event. It was really valuable. And I know Eric does a lot of sailing with coaches too. So I could share some of my thoughts of sailing with the coach, but Eric, you do a lot of sailing, with your Star and even with the Scows where you have a coach or a buddy in a motorboat. And I mean, how important is it for you, like when you're sailing your Star, just to have a set of eyes on looking at setup and just someone off the boat to kind of help you? I mean, how do you use that to help you out?
Well, I think it's really nice to have 2 things: to have a consistent tuning partner, a buddy of yours, that's fast and is used to tuning and not wasting a lot of time, and that is on the kind of the same schedule as you. You guys can leave the dock together. I got several of them in the Star class. My favorite one is sailing with John McCausland. If I go to a big regatta, we say, hey, we're gonna dock out at 9 o'clock, for sure. And if there's a problem, we send each other a text, hey, I'm gonna be 5 minutes late, but it's especially if you're in a bigger venue, if you leave the dock together and you start tuning and you have someone in a powerboat to help you get up to speed quickly. And it's, usually the first day you shake the rust off, you've hopefully checked all your settings or where they're at. And then you get up to speed very quickly. And then you can focus on on racing once the regatta actually starts. You know, how many times have we gone to regatta last minute? We show up Saturday morning, we throw the boat in, we don't check anything, we have a bad day, we struggle, we have a big problem, we get done Saturday night, we look, oh yeah, I forgot I changed the rake last time and it was all screwed up. No wonder I had so much helm, or my board angle was off because we replaced the rope and we didn't put the knot for the right angle. And then you get done, and you get out there Sunday and you're feeling better and you go real fast and you get done with the day and you're like, hey, wow, now I'm ready to start the regatta. You're like, well, gosh, if we'd done a little more homework and then shown up on Friday and worked with somebody, then you'd be, that's the benefit that I like, is that I'm ready to go when the racing starts. You know, race one, I'm all good.
Yeah, it's huge. So for this event, and I was going out to this regatta and really the only guy from the East Coast that drove all the way back to Iowa for the second time this summer. And but it was cool. So Chris and Al, buddies that we met up with down in Eustis over the winter, were like, hey, come out and do this event. We did this practice day. We got John Porter from their home lake in Beulah to coach us. And it was really good because I was feeling like I was pretty fast going out there, and he really gave some insights that helped me out quite a bit. And I'll share a couple of them. One was, it was a little on the breezier side, and it was probably 14 to 16. I was like thinking I was pretty quick, and I was in the tuning, and he got behind me in the motorboat. He's like, you got to try just sailing, get yourself in position, and then grab the board line, and as you're going, just slightly pull the board until you feel the boat just let go. And when I was going, it was probably that much on the rope, not like an inch, barely. Just got the board up enough, and he could feel the tiller and the boat just take off. It was a really important lesson of just how, when you got to that part where you were starting to bang on, even sheet out, but just that little bit of board, and all of a sudden the boat just, like, it felt like it was planing upwind basically. And just kind of the reinforcement of having someone there to be like, oh, you got too much helm, you got to get, you got to hike harder, which I never do, and B, using the board, you got to use that to help out quite a bit. The other thing that I think was pretty valuable from that coaching session was just from the practice race, having someone make some observations that paid later. And one of them that he kept reinforcing was, if you get up towards the lake, this little point of land that's there would keep giving you a pretty strong lefty. And he was like, don't, disregard this point when you get to this part in the lake. And it was funny, later in the regatta, we end up sailing the exact same course we trained on, the exact thing. And the race course was even. And we got to the point and boom, can you, figure out how to do that? So, or how to use that point to your advantage. And it was critical basically in the regatta. It was kind of came down to when the regatta was tighter, having a good race there and doing that. So, it was really good just to have that set of eyes. And I didn't actually realize the value of having someone there to do it. So that was important. And going down here, he reinforced something that you and I have talked about, at length, is just how critical the heel angle and having constant angles on the boat was. So that was really good for me. And then lastly, and I'm gonna go to the next slide here, because Eric, I think this is where you really come into here, is he was really on me about kind of the power of using the outhaul as basically a way of trimming the sail in some ways. So, I'd come off the line, and if I needed to point or get some more power, he was like, just ease the outhaul a little bit. Or, once I got my bow free, he was kind of talking to me about pulling the outhaul on more to kind of change the shape in the back end of the sail to get the boat to accelerate. And I know you do that a lot on all the other Scows and some of the boats you sail. So I don't know, can you kind of talk me through sail wise why that makes sense to do that and what that really does?
Yeah, I'm a big outhaul fan. In fact, I have two boats that I drive, a Star and an Etchells, and I have the outhaul rigged that it comes out just underneath the main sheet. So I'm always holding the main sheet in my hand, but it's right there. If there's one thing, I sailed in San Diego, the Etchells, in the boat, the outhaul's up on the boom, and it was just killing me. I get a big puff. We need maximum weight. We're trying to release the helm, and the forward guy had to lean in the boat and pull the outhaul on. And I was just like, oh my God, this is really just killing me, because when the puff comes, we're trying to keep the same heel angle. We're trying to keep the same feel on the helm, the same rudder angle. And the fastest, quickest way to do that is depowering with the outhaul. You know, we'd rather not sheet out too much. We'd rather keep the main pretty firm, so we're still going upwind as best we can, but we pull on the bottom, we flatten the lower part of the sail, we open up the leech, we unload the helm, and then vice versa. We sail into a lull, puff goes away, or the breeze just dies, and the boat flattens out, and then maybe we trim the main a little harder to get that feel back, but maybe that's too tight. So if we can just ease that outhaul and shut the lower leech down and power the boat up, and then we can still point. We don't, you know, we want to keep the boat going the same speed. Often we bear away a little bit, we lose a little height. So I think it's really critical to have a really nice rig for your outhaul that's accessible from the rail, and that we pay attention to it, and we play it quite a bit. You know, it's one of, if not the most, you know, next to the main sheet itself, it's probably the most powerful sail adjustment tool on the boat.
Yeah, and I've been using it more and more. So, you know, and you can kind of clarify this for me, but know that anyway, it really is only affecting the bottom like third. Is that what you'd say? You'd agree? And
yeah,
the biggest thing for me, that my takeaway, especially on this boat, is it really changes the return on the back end of the sail. So if I'm coming off the line, especially like it's one of those like lazy hike modes, or, you know, you're just hiking and you need to keep the bow up, you know, sometimes a little less outhaul kind of gives you that little pointy, keeping the bow up without having to over trim the top of the sail, right? And then as soon as you're kind of bow free, I felt like I could pull it more on and put the bow down and not have to basically change your sheet, but the boat would accelerate. Is that what you would do basically?
yeah. I think anytime we, you know, if we need a little power, especially through the chop, you know, we might have to sail a little more twisty just to free the boat up. The bow's getting thrown around a little bit, or we have to drive through the waves. You know, we might ease it and then ease the sheet, because when we open the top of the sail, we're taking power away, we're twisting. So where do we get the power from? We get it back in the bottom of the sail, the bottom half. And and if we want to, if it's quite flat water, we're trying to go fast, we're trying to have a speed shape, a flatter shape, where we trim hard, then we're going to pull the outhaul on a little more and flatten out the bottom. Let us sheet a little harder. It's a lower drag shape, and it gets us going through the water quicker.
Yeah, and this comes back, I was thinking back at this regatta a little bit yesterday and today as we were putting this together. I think the biggest step forward in sailing this boat was playing the outhaul more, and actually even the main sheet a little bit less, but more adjusting of the outhaul to kind of keep the boat powered up and doing these things. Whereas I think earlier in my MC career, and you saw this from coaching me, especially like on the starting line, the tendency is to over trim the main to keep the bow up, and then the boat slows down. Whereas if you ease the outhaul a little bit, you don't have to sheet as hard, and the boat actually doesn't slow down. It just points higher for a little bit until you get yourself going. So that was a huge lesson for me, and kind of reinforced the need. Luckily, all these boats are designed where the outhaul's right next to you when you're sitting on the rail. So it's pretty nice. You do it, you know, it's pretty choice. So anyway, that was a big lesson that I took away from the inlands, and I think it made a huge difference. So anyway, later in the summer, you know, me and my buddy Sean, you know Sean from over the winter, took a trip out here to Allan Chris's Lake in Beulah, and did this cool regatta out there, the Dorn Memorial Regatta. And we did a clinic on Friday, and 2 days, well, 1 day racing. Sunday got canceled due to no wind. And we had a fun time. And for those of you guys who haven't been there, the lake is quite small, and there's a lot of points of land in it, and it's a really fun and challenging place to sail. But you know, I was thinking about one of the lessons here was going downwind on the lake, and how to kind of transition through the modes of either sitting to leeward, like in the photo here, or sitting on the high side. And my biggest takeaway from that was how critical versus upwind, well, not that it's not critical upwind, but downwind, the vang tension was. Because if you're sitting to leeward, in order to heel the boat enough, you got to ease the vang off enough so the boom doesn't drag in the water. But as soon as you heel on the high side, if you don't firm up the vang right away, you just lose a ton of basically pressure and wind off the top of the sail. And the other thing it really seemed to kind of play on was the more vang you had when you're sitting to windward, the mast bent to windward, and the sail just looked better. I don't know if that makes sense to you or not, but it was like when the mast was straight, it got really kind of baggy near the mast. And then all of a sudden you pull the vang on, even when you're going downwind, and the mast bent to, you know, bowed to windward, and the whole sail just kind of looked better. And then when you pulled the main sheet to pump it, there was some load on the leech and things like that. So that was a huge one that I took away from that event, was how critical when you're transitioning to make sure your vang tension's right. And I guess my question to you, just from a sail shape perspective, is, we talk about the vang upwind all the time, but it's equally as critical just from a shape wise downwind, right, Eric? I mean, you can't just ignore it. I mean, in most boats, it's actually more important. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I saw right off the bat, first time I saw MC was, that the mast is untapered. There's quite a lot of mast above the hounds. There's a huge unsupported section at the top of the mast, and we don't have any way to control that other than with the main sheet tension. And when the boom's out, it's all about the vang. So the sail has to be flat enough when it's windy with the mast bent, and then when we ease the sheet a little bit in light air, we make it full. But if the mast gets perfectly straight, then all that shape just goes max forward in the sail, and it's really hard to get any flow at all, or any semblance of a nice looking fast shape. And probably the other thing it does, as it straightens up, the shape pulls forward, it's actually pulling the leech in, so you're kind of reducing your sail area. If you can bend the mast a little bit, then the whole sail is kind of being spread more, and we're going downwind. That's what you need. You want as much area as you can without making it too flat and getting a little flow. So yeah, I can see where the vang is super critical. Easing the outhaul and getting the vang just right, getting the heel angle. Looks really comfortable there sitting the leeward. But anyway, that'll be something you got to play with a lot downwind, I would think. Every little change in the pressure.
For sure. And the other thing that, if you look, or my takeaway from sailing these, and you saw this when you coached, how deep you can sail when you're heeling the boat to windward. But as soon as you're sitting on the low side downwind, you got to put the bow up and get pressure on the boat, or you just distance left and right. And, so the angles are quite different, whether you're high side trying to get deep, or if you're lured trying to just get the boat to go and keep pressure on the sail, because you can't do it if it's not windy enough to sit on the high side. So just transitioning to these modes and knowing when to use them. And at this regatta, it was actually quite tricky for those who were there. The wind was coming down the lake. There was an island in the middle of the lake, which I didn't know about until after first race. And, but trying to transitioning through these puffs and how the wind streaked through and getting around there made it really important to go from these modes. And part of that moding was you switch high to low side, you have to switch the boards, but then you had to be pretty quick to adjust the vang and do that, especially if you were going from the high side to the low side. If you left the vang on, the boom just crashed in the water and it kicked in and the boat just slowed down right away. So as you're doing the transition, getting the vang off, moving your weight, I mean, it's actually a pretty complicated maneuver if you're doing a single-handed to transition all this stuff. So it was a pretty good practice for that. And that was, really fun regatta, and it was a fun place to sail. And for those of you guys who haven't been there, I highly recommend you go back or go there and do it. And I think it's about 20 minutes from Lake Geneva. It's not that far from kind of between Chicago and Milwaukee, or closer to Milwaukee, but it's a super fun place to go. And if people have a chance to go, they definitely should go there. It's awesome. So, and then last, but certainly not least, we had a regatta in Jersey. This is the same venue where the Nationals are going to be next year in September, but this was the first weekend of October, and it was a beautiful early fall day in Jersey. Everything was blowing 8 to 14 or so, and we had a really good weekend. I think it was 34 boats or something, really cool. And there's a picture of the start there, pretty crowded starting line. And big thing from here, Mark Lewis already asked a question about how I came off the starting line so quick, and I will talk about that. But one of the things I want to talk with you, Eric, about is, starting in venues like this, and how do you practice and get a good judge of where the line is and how to kind of get the boat where you want it and judging that? We sail on a lot of boats that have Velocitex and things like that, but how do we get starting well? Like what do you do when you're in type of venues?
I really work hard on having an accurate line sight. And this photo kind of shows I like to be hanging out in this area as they set the line. and then I sight back through, I line the pin end buoy up with a committee boat and try and find something on the shore that that can give me a good line sight. And then, so I find out exactly where it is, and then I keep bearing away, and I find something else, and I say, okay, in San Diego, you're looking back at Coronado Island and the beach, and there's all kinds of buildings downtown, maybe the bridge. So I find out where it is, and then I keep sailing down. I say, okay, this is right on the line, and this is where, if I see this, I should probably be there at like 5 seconds. And then I find another building or something and say, oh, I should be there at 10 seconds. And I sail another few lengths. I say, oh, this is 15 seconds and 30. So I kind of have a couple things in mind of where I'd like to be at a certain time, so that when I come up to the line, I've kind of done a few runs at it, so that I've just started the clock, and I find out how long it takes me to get there. And then it doesn't always, the whole fleet, if they get to the line really soon, then I kind of know where I am. But I really have a good idea of where I am exactly. It's a little harder if there's no line sights. If you're looking the other way in San Diego, you're looking out to sea. So unless you're look at some islands or something like that, the Coronado Islands, that's hard. So I often look back against the shore. And then, in Miami, it's the same way. There's all kinds of stuff downtown and Key Biscayne and things like that. But I have 3 or 4 or 5 line sites that help me determine how far from the line I am. And the most important one being kind of the last one. I've got like this danger that, hey, if I see this thing, the gun better be going, or I better not go any further, so that when the clock goes, I don't want to be over early, but I want to be on the line, but I want to be there. And just, when you get to the starting area, I just start the clock and I say, okay, I'm going to do 2 or 3 timed runs. And then you get a feel for the acceleration. And that's, again, we were talking about it, of doing a little training, a little practicing, because you can never start too good. Your time and distance can never be too accurate, and it changes every day. It changes for the wind strength, it changes for the sea state, it changes for the density of the air. So it's just we can't get good enough at that. The best match racers in the world, they start well, because you'll see them in the pre-start, they're just doing loop after loop after loop. Actually, I was in Switzerland last week. I sailed with this guy. He's just one of the best bow guys in the world. His name's Matt Cassidy, and he just is. He's a bow guy on all kinds of boats over the world. But one of the best features he has is he's just always looking at the line, and he's talking. Okay, we're 45 seconds from the line. We're 40 seconds to the line, and we get close, and he's like, there's still like, be careful, 10 seconds to kill. 10 seconds, it's really windy. It's hard to kill time when it's windy, right? Because you got a lot of momentum. Or, vice versa. If it's really light, he's like, be careful, we're getting late. And he's 5 to kill, 3 to kill, go, go, go. And he was just fantastic at that. So always having known where the line is and knowing your acceleration. It's just something we can never do too much of and get too good at.
Yeah, I fully
There's a
agree.
question here. It said you had speed in most of the starts at Green Island. What did you use to do that, Al?
Yeah, so one of the things that I learned midway through the summer, and this is going to sound makes me really realize how dumb I've been about this whole process, is, we were like I said, John Porter was coaching us there at the Inlands, and we were doing some practice starts, and I'm like, man, I don't understand how these guys keep their boats from sliding sideways. I'm like, I don't understand it. Like after 3 starts, he's like, hey, Al, in the pre-start, put both boards down.
Yeah. I learned that too in the Scow this summer.
Yeah, I was like, oh,
big call. Both boards.
I was like, both boards, huh? I didn't know that was. All of a sudden, I started putting both boards down, and boom, I was able to hold a spot and get some good starts. I was like, wow, I felt pretty stupid, you
make like half the leeway.
It's like half the amount of leeway. And the thing is, but what I did learn from that though, is there's a flip side. Now you have to change all of your mechanics to starting, because you got to remember, board up, heel, trim, go, right? So there's a little bit more mechanics to it. So that was a big part of it. And then the other one, and this picture actually shows it pretty decently. So if you look, I'm 27.75. I'm here in the, kind of pinned third. But if you look, like the sail always has some load on it, right? And if you look at a lot of the other boats, they're full luffing in this start. And we're probably 25, 30 seconds to go to start here. But I think this is the key. I think when the boat gets fully unloaded and then you try to reload it, it's really tough. But if you can figure out a way to really manage your speed, and this goes back to what you were talking about before of doing timed runs, and just really understand that you have to keep way on and keep the boat moving and then go, it's a lot easier. And I've used this analogy before, and I'm sure all of you probably heard it and you're tired of hearing it. It's a lot easier to go from, 1.5 knots to 4 knots upwind than it is to go from a dead stop to 4 knots, right? It's just a different, you don't have to accelerate as much, right? And there's always flow over the foil, so you're not going sideways. So just making sure you have some pace on, and like I would call this, if we were sailing on another boat, I'd be like, all right, we're gonna do a high kill, right? Where the sheets are on, you're just sailing inside the sails and going slow. And I know, you sail J70s or other boats, you do this a lot. And now I realize with 2 boards down, you can do it on this boat too, is trimming, keeping the sail working, but just going high and slow. And then when you're ready to go, you're actually pulling the windward board up. You're not even really trimming the sailing because it's mostly trimmed. You're just kind of bearing off and heeling over, and the boat just takes off. And I think that's where a lot of the boats that got in trouble is they had to go board up, trim, and bear off. And it's too much to do, right? So if you have enough sheet on, the boat's kind of going, and it's just board up and a slight bear off and the boat just goes. And I think that was the biggest takeaway from that weekend. The other thing is just look at this photo. You can see it. There's not a lot of space, right? So just really working hard on finding areas that are less condensed, or, spots where you just have enough to keep the boat, moving. And going back to you're saying, knowing where the line is critical, because there was one race in particular, wasn't this race, where it was pretty pin favored. And, when the pin's favored versus the boat, your close rate is a lot slower to the line, right? So at like 30 seconds to go, I was set up a little higher, and everyone's kind of looking at me like, you're going to be over. But the problem is when they sheeted in, they didn't get closer to the line. They were kind of paralleling the line or making a very slow close. So when we started to go, I was already like over top of the boats and kind of reaching. And then the gun went off and I kind of just turned and sailed up, and it was a pretty noticeable difference. So, knowing if the pin end is favored, that the close rate is a lot slower, you have to set up close. And it's a huge deal. I mean, this photo, it's, pretty square line. You can see the boats are off, but if it shifts left and it goes pin favored, you have to be close. You have to set up closer. Unlike if the boat end's favored, you can be further off. And that was a key one. The other thing is, and I think it's pretty important, going back to, he's asking what I did to get off the line is, we do these tune-ups, right? You go upwind and you get your settings and you tune your rig and you do a few things. And then you bear off, you go back to the starting line and you let everything off, right? Like you use the Outhaul, you use the Vang, you use your main sheet, you do everything. All of a sudden you get ready to start, you're pulling everything on again. But unless you marked it or you have good markings on the boat, it's hard to do. So one of the things I'm pretty particular about is like, if I do my pre-start and I check the Outhaul and I'm pretty happy with it, I kind of leave it there. And the same thing with the Cunningham, or, I can't do it with the Vang necessarily in this boat, but, I've got some marks on my Vang, so I know where it goes. And that way it's quick to get back to your settings. I mean, you don't want to have the gun go off and be readjusting everything, because when you bore off, you let everything off, right? So I know it seems pretty basic, but I think a lot of people do that. You go upwind, you get all tuned up, you feel good, and then you change everything. And it kind of didn't make too much sense. So that was a big one from that regatta for me, is kind of how critical. And this regatta was interesting because the venue, for those of you who haven't sailed in Jersey, it's not like sailing on a lake. It's more of a open body water. You're going to drag race. You got to get good starts, speed type of venue. So it kind of put more of a premium on, this thing of getting good starts and just being able to hold the lane and go as fast as you can. And, kind of change my focus from the earlier races where you're sailing on lakes and it's shifty, puffy, kind of a different thing. So it was a good learn, and for the nationals next year, it'll be good.
I got one more point I want to make real quick, Al, about
Sure.
starting.
Yeah.
There's it's great if we have a big hole and we get there a little close, and then we can bear off and accelerate and shoot off the line and still have room to lure. That's great.
Yep.
But in reality, we think about a lot of our starts, we've just barely got enough hole to leeward of us, right? Maybe we've got a length or something like that, or 3/4 of a length. So we don't have the luxury of bearing off. A lot of times what I like to do before the start, sometime I sail the boat in kind of that high, slow mode. And then I start my watch and I look at the clock, this clock has started, and I bear away to close hauled, no lower, or maybe just a degree lower. And then I find out how long it takes me to get up to speed when I'm on the wind, because it's a lot longer than when we get to bear away. So if I don't have a room to bear away, I'd usually trim in and just start going. And if the guy below me doesn't do that, I either go over him or the guy bears away to accelerate, and then I've got a big hole. So a lot of times it's almost, sometimes it can be twice as long. It depends how big the boat is. But I bet on this boat, if you sit both boards down and then, you know, you're kind of high and slow like you are, and then trim the main in, pull the board up and see how long it takes you to get to where you feel like you're full speed, you know, in lighter air. I bet it's 15, 20 seconds. And a lot of times
Exactly.
we're so close to the line. We think, oh, I don't want to trim. I don't want to trim in. But in reality, you trim in, you're going to be just fine. And if you get there just a few seconds early, well, you can kill it a little bit high, gain a little gauge, and then bear away and go. And you haven't given up that hold and lured, you know, that we've worked so hard in the whole last, you know, minute and a half, 2 minutes to get, and then we have a little bit of freedom there. But
yeah,
that's a drill I'd love to do. And it, you know, especially if you switch boats around, and this boat trying to get the board up and getting the sheet just right and getting the hiking straps, all that, I bet, you know, you do that 3 or 4 times before the start, you're gonna be a lot more comfortable once the actual racing starts.
yeah, and I know for sure that, you know, I probably spend, of all the stuff I do pre-race, I spend more time doing run-ups to the line and doing, like you're talking about, trim in and go and getting a good feel for it than almost anything else. Because, I mean, you know this, if you can get a decent, the race is a lot easier than clawing your way from taking transoms and fighting for it. So it's one of those things that it makes a huge difference. The other thing that I learned, again, I know this sounds kind of crazy, the difference in my starting on this boat, going from using my watch on my wrist to setting the tactic to the time, so that when I'm trimming and doing all this, I could see it instead of looking like this every time, because you don't have someone calling it out to you, right? You got to do it. Made a huge difference. And it's still kind of, you know, I'm watching the fleet a little bit, and it's amazing how many people still use their wristwatch and they have the tactic right there and they don't set it, or whatever compass they're using. You got to use the clock on there. It's right in front of you. Makes such a massive difference to starting on this thing, because if you have to look down, you're not paying attention to what you're doing. So that's a pretty big change, I think, to what you need to do. But going back to the original question there, the biggest thing for getting speed off the line to me was kind of the high kill, like you're talking about, board up, and then that turn into acceleration, you know, a slight bear off, main is still kind of in. And the one key to that, I think, or actually not really, I think I know, is the heel angle off of that is critical. And I actually think this is the one time where being a touch on the flatter side is better, because you're trying to bear off and you want the boat to go. If you get caught too heeled, the boat kind of trips over itself. So I think this is the one time when you're coming from this flat position, it's okay to be like a slower heel into the acceleration than a quick heel, and then the boat kind of trips up and then tries to go down. So, you know, kind of managing that heel as you turn, I think, is a really important part. So anyway, we'll move on here. So we did have some updates in the tuning, and this came through these regattas, and we've got some numbers down here. And you know, for all of you guys who are out there watching this, if you have your phone, feel free to take a picture, and this will be recorded, but, you know, shoot away here to have this. And, you know, we've been lucky. We've had a lot of people switch over to using the new sail. The Magnum has been awesome. And, you know, we've got people using a variety of boats, and we've kind of found out a few things. So we're really happy. I know I'm really happy with this 28'3" measurement for the Johnson boat, or sorry, the Melgus boat. And going to 3.5 inches is definitely, I think, for the Johnson, the way to be. It just seems like the boat sets up better. The guys who've had them have been doing pretty well. And I think that's pretty common across the board, but I still want to point out that there's a different rake measurement to use. One of the bigger things here, though, is the spreaders. And the 17-inch spreaders that you see here is kind of the standard that people have had for a while. And I think this 4 to 4.25 inches is really pretty good. And that's kind of your standard tuning with this, you know, either the fixed spreaders that were on there, or, you know, the old twisty barrels that the folks have. They were shorter spreaders, 17-inch spreaders. Some of the new boats are using longer spreaders, And to keep kind of the same amount of pre-bend, it's looking like it's 4.5 to 4 3/4 spreader sweep for that. One of the things I did learn, and this kind of came up recently as well, is there are some boats with 16-inch spreaders, which are really short. And then again, to keep the pre-bend the same, you're in that 3 to 3 3/4 range to do it. And the whole thing for me is when you trim the main end and you get it set up, it doesn't get too knuckle forward, and you don't have so much sweep though that when you pull the vang on the mast, the main washes out. So these seem to be really, really good numbers. And I guess, Eric, maybe you can jump in here too. Just basically a quick minute, what does spreader sweep really do to the sail shape? Just so everyone, just from basic concept, what does it do?
Yeah, basically the more sweep you have, the more it allows the mast to bend. We're trying to match the mast bend to the luff curve of the sail. If you can see that picture behind you. Oh, well, you can't see it. It's your screensaver. But if yeah, a little bit there. We can see the overbend wrinkles in the sail. So it's probably pretty breezy there. And he's got the spreader. Those overbend wrinkles are pretty well evenly spread along the whole sail. They're not just localized to one point where, maybe if the spreaders were too far aft, it would be bending so much right at the spreaders that it would just turn inside out. They're even all the way up. And if they happen too quickly and the sail gets too flat, too quick, then maybe, we'll push the spreaders forward a little bit and restrict the mast bend just a touch. And it's just something every mast is a little bit different. So we want to have a starting point. This is our tuning guide. It's not the 10 commandments. It's let's start here and let's see how the boat goes. How does it feel? How does the sail look? Oh gosh, I feel really overpowered. I never can get the sail to flatten out. I never see any overbend wrinkles in my main. When it's windy, I just get right out the back. I got to ease the sheet so much. No matter how hard I pull the vang, the sail doesn't get flattened. Well, probably let the spreaders back a little bit, let the mast bend a little more, and help the sail flatten out. So that's basically the difference here between the 16, 17, 18-inch spreaders. That's if we think about a triangle, and say the mast is in the middle. If the longer we go, the more sweep there is. So we're just keeping it consistent along there based on the length of the spreader. And
so one question I have for you is,
yeah,
what do you think that the spreader length actually does to the rig on the boat like this, and how the mast sets up? I mean, do you think that actually the longer spreaders are pushing the mast to leeward? Or, I mean, you and I've talked about this a little bit. I mean, what's your on that?
Yeah, I mean, the longer they are, definitely the more it loads the base, and it will push. And the shorter they are, then the less effect. I would have to think that having really short spreaders wouldn't be as beneficial when it's windy. And it wouldn't help the mast lock in as much. It wouldn't help stabilize it. I think a little bit of poke on them has got to help out, because it locks everything in a little bit. It loads the spreader, which pushes the mast, and I think that's a good thing. I bet it makes a big difference. You probably can't tell any difference when it's flat and everybody's kind of trimmed the same, but when the chop comes up and the boat's bouncing around a bit, I think it helps stabilize the mast and therefore the shape of the sail, which I think would be better.
Probably pushes the middle to leeward,
yeah,
up a little bit too, right?
Which just a little bit.
Yeah, is unsupported there. So
yeah.
And then I really want to reinforce this shroud tension thing, and this is one of the things that we were down there this winter. We developed was taking the loose gauge of PT1, which our guide said PT2, which we're updating to say PT1, to put on 15 on there and basically take the side, set them to number 15 on the gauge, and then take 2 full turns off. And that was kind of our starting position of, in the old guide, what we were saying is hand tight or whatever it was, grapefruit size swing or whatever it was. I could never figure it out. Drove both of us nuts. So this came as our starting. And what I've found, and this is kind of the way I've kind of gauged my rig tuning from here. And I think it actually works depending on your size the same way, because you kind of go through these modes earlier or later, depending on if you're bigger or smaller. But I think the need to depower is probably the same, right? So if you're smaller, like for me, if I'm sitting to leeward the whole time, I stay at this 15 -2. As soon as I feel like I'm sitting on the high side, not hiking, but sitting, I add a half a turn or 3 nut faces on the Staymaster tighter. I mean, if you're smaller than me and you get up to sitting sooner, you might go to those plus half turn, 2 knots breeze sooner than me, which is fine. But I still think it's accomplishing what you wanted to do. And I really feel good about this half a turn tighter if you're sitting. As soon as I'm hiking, I like to add another half a turn or be 1 turn up from 15 -2. So then I'd be 15 -1, basically. And I stay in that tuning until I'm really starting to get overpowered, which is I'm max bang, I'm max outhaul, and now I'm starting to think about dropping the traveler. If I'm doing that in my warm-ups, I'm probably ready to go to this 15 plus 1.5. I've never actually gone to 15 +2. I think it would have to be really windy, but that really seems to be like a pretty nice setting when it's blowing hard, is to get the rig tight enough, kind of stiffen the rig up so when you pull the vang on and the boat seems to go pretty well. And if you have a crew, maybe you only go to 15 +1, or, you know, because you're not depowering as quickly, but it kind of gives you the mode of what the range is as you do it. So one story about this, I'll give you an example from Okoboji at the inland. So we did 2 races in the morning, first day. It was just hiking. So I was at 15, you know, the base setting plus a turn. So I was at the full hiking full-time setting. We went out after lunch. It was pretty windy. I added the half a turn and, you know, boat went fine. I didn't sail a great race, but it was plenty fast enough, felt good. So once again, me being, you know, lazy me like I shouldn't be, my normal routine is to back the rig off back to base and start the day at the same. But I left it at the full depower mode, went out in the morning, and this is where I kind of learned the lesson. I did my warm up and it was pretty breezy. I was hiking, but I wasn't depowered. And I kind of convinced myself that the boat felt powered up enough because I was hiking and everything was good. But the reality of it was the boat was woefully underpowered. And instead of having the rig off and the ability to pull the vang on and the ability to pull the outhaul on, I was sailing no vang or loose vang, looser outhaul with the rig tight, and the boat just didn't go. So it was a pretty important lesson to me, is to make sure that you start down. If you're not sure, keep going down a setting, sail the boat, and if you're overpowered, go up. But don't be in one of these up settings, like tighter settings, and try and convince yourself that the boat is going good enough. Because the reality of it was the boat was just woefully underpowered. And, you know, it's pretty funny that you didn't think in a scow it would be that big of a deal to be underpowered in 14 knots of breeze. But man, you get a puff and the boat doesn't accelerate, it's really a bummer. You can just see the boats just walk away from you. So it was a pretty big lesson for me to do that. But the other thing I do, and I think I actually learned this from you, is a little star trick, is just making sure, you know, when you get the rig set, you know, to paint one of the sides of the Staymaster, you know, put a marker or something so you're able to keep track of your turns easier, and kind of keep them on, because like I was saying, 3 faces, it's pretty easy to count the sides of the nut there as you turn it. And if one is colored, it's pretty easy to keep track of it. I don't know if folks are doing that, but I know I've done that and it's gone pretty well. So
yeah, that's what we do. We paint the ones. Starboard has uppers and lowers, and we paint the one that basically we can see. You know, it's, there's not one facing aft. There's usually a point facing aft, but I can see them all the time, even from the back of the boat. We either paint them red or black.
Yeah.
And we know, and if we say, hey, we're going to go half a turn off, then I know I can't see it. And if I see one's red and one's not, I'm like, uh-oh, we got a problem here. We're a little asymmetrical. Right. And, you know, to your point of the power, yeah, I would think just like any other boat, you know, there's not really an intermediate setup, right? We're either looking for power, we're looking to get up on the high side and start hiking and start pulling the vang off, or we're there hiking all the time and the outhaul's on hard and the Cunningham's on and they're starting to bang hard and we're trying to get rid of it. You know, it's kind of like flipping a switch. If you're, you know, you've got this sitting on the high side, a half turn, that's just because you've gone from like a really loose setting to, okay, just like a standard. But once, you know, until we get to that, oh man, and you probably only want to do it if we do a lot of lake sailing. We see there's big puffs and lulls. you know, in general, you know, what's the general, set the boat up for the lulls, right? If
Right.
we've got the boat. So I did a regatta last year in Miami in the Etchells, and a big puff came through, and we tightened the rig, and we came off the line, and we said, God, thankfully we tightened the rig, and we're cruising along, and we're grinding by boats, and then the wind, that puff went away, the big puff went away, and boats went by us on both sides. I was like, oh my God, ease the rig immediately, and we did. We got rolled, we tacked out, we were back to our base setting, we were able to hike. You know, we had to let the traveler down a little bit. We had to start tightening the outhaul, a little backstay, but it got us on the rail, got us hiking. We got free, got a couple shifts, and we got to the top mark first after being rolled at the start. And we don't want to sail the boat underpowered. You know, we love to be in the hiking straps. We love to start pulling the bang on in the MC. You know, we can live through the big puffs, right? Again, here we see a big puff coming. We can pull the outhaul on. We can pull the vang on really hard, over trim the vang. Sail might not look that great, but we get through the puff, we get out of the puff, vang goes off, we're still hiking, we get even lighter, we let a little out haul off, and then we're going good in the lulls, because we can't, you know, we can depower easier than we can power up.
For sure. So we have a couple questions here. So Al Hager is asking about the shroud tensions, and all this is relative to 15 minus 2 turns. So just to clear it up, we start by tensioning the rig up to 15, and then we take 2 full turns off, and that is our starting point for everything. So we use the 15 as a way to get the tensions equal and to get it to where we know we're starting from, and then we take 2 full turns off, and that's basically what we would call the bottom of our gauge, the loosest we would go. And then you do half a turn from there, a full turn from there, you know, all from the 15 minus 2. So that's where it all starts from, not from 15. And then we had a couple questions from Mark Beaton. And one of them is the spreader length. How do we measure it? It's from the sidewall of the mast right to the tip is how they measure it. It's not from the center or the front. So we're doing it right from the sidewall. That's how the class measures it. 18 inches is the max length you can have. So it's just from side of the mast to where the shrouds are going through the spreader from the side. But then he's asking about upwind and downwind technique in very light air, very light air. And I have a few points, and I know Eric can jump in here because we experienced this in Eustis. So I think the 2 things that I took away from very light air is, one, you have to find a way to be comfortable sitting under the boom, which pardon my language, it sucks, but you have to figure it out, right? And the deal is keeping the boat steady. I think that's the hardest thing that I took away was when you're upwind in that, just keeping the boat steady in terms of heel and not, you know, moving the tiller around and moving your body. You just had to figure out how to get the boat steady. And I think that was key, especially on the upwind mode, is just finding a place you're comfortable and keeping the boat even. And then downwind, the biggest thing to me is, and I know this sounds kind of crazy, but just finding a way to have space, because as soon as you're near other boats downwind, it felt like the boat just went slow. And I don't know if it's air going over all of them, but they throw a pretty big wind shadow. And it felt like to me, as soon as you had space, you could put the bow up to accelerate and then drive off, and put the bow up and drive off and kind of zigzag your way downwind in light air, the boat just seems better. And if you're stuck in a pack, it seemed pretty awful. Eric, I don't know if you remember from those what you saw from the coach boat, but
yeah, it looks painful in really light air.
Yeah,
it looks bad. It doesn't look very, very comfortable or fun. You know, we end up doing it a lot, you know, sailing on the lakes. We you know, we do it here all summer long. But I think you're exactly right. You know, the gains of just keeping the boat going, keeping it on a steady angle of heel and not jumping around so much is very critical. And if we sail next to other boats downwind, we have to do it sometimes because everybody's, you know, we've got to sail towards a puff or something. But if we're dictated by where we go by someone else, then we don't get to sail the boat at what we feel is the optimum angle. You know, if we, that's why I hate fighting with other people or people behind you fighting, they've drawn you up or something. You're just like, well, this is a nice puff. You know, yeah, you might be able to go over me, you might put the bow up, but we're reaching off to Never Land, and everybody behind us or to leeward of us, they're just sailing away. So let's sail our optimal angle. And that again is time in the boat. You know, training with a training partner, set up a couple, 3-4 lengths apart, and then start figuring out the technique, relearning. We don't get to sail all the time, but we have to relearn. Okay, in this puff and this much air, this is the angle we should be sailing. This seems like the best VMG, and you can look at everybody over there and, oh, look, he's actually sailing hotter and he's sailing away from me, or vice versa. He's sailing lower and he's gaining gauge and he's just going away from me. Okay, I'm probably sailing a little too hot. So that's, again, our training partner and a coach boat really helps, because they can see the difference between, oh, maybe you're heeling too much, or you're moving the tiller too much, things like that. So it's a little training goes a long way.
So we got another question here about what's the difference between the Magnum, which is the new sail that we're quite happy with actually, versus the Z Max, and kind of, what we've done and why the second batten is shorter. And I'll let you talk about that after I talk about a few of the things we've done. So one of the things we did, first thing we did in changing the Magnum to Z Max was we did a cloth change, and we really like the new cloth that we're using. I think it's more dynamic, and I think it translates better in the downrange conditions than what we were using on the Z Max before. And when it's windy, it's definitely strong enough. It's a cloth we've used on boats like the Star and some other high performance boats with big sails, and we really like the way that's up. The second thing we did is we took the Magnum flying shape, and Eric, you're going to jump in here and clean up my verbiage on this too, is, we translated that shape through our computer system to shape the seams smoother. And maybe I'm not saying that right, but basically what we've done is we looked at a way of making the sail as smooth as possible, and the sail was not as fair as it could have been. And we kind of looked at it, Eric and I were starting to look at the sails, and we're like, wow, if we really take this from a digitized pattern and we put this into our computer design system, we can make a sail that's really smooth. And we did that, and we did that with the full batten lengths. And then we were going sailing, look at the sail, and we realized we needed to change the second batten from the top, because, again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, when especially in light air, it was just pushing the draft too far forward right there by the mast. So basically what we did is it made that part of the sail just so straight for so long. And then when it got close to the mast, it got really knuckle forward, and it kind of allowed the top of the sail to be more draft aft, and we didn't have to bend the mast as much, and it kind of looked a little smoother. Is that?
Yeah, exactly right. We depth wise, there weren't a whole lot of changes from the Z Max. It's just more even top to bottom. The Z Max looked more like there was a distinct middle section, a foot section, and then the head was kind of messed up with the batten. We'd much rather have a more even, what we call the vertical profile of the sail. I learned that years ago from my buddy Steve Calder, who's one of the best designers in the world. He doesn't look at a sail as a lot of people do. You look at the draft stripe on it, or where the shape is front to back. He looks at the vertical profile of the sail, and that's really nice having a coach too. They can see that. It's hard to see from on the boat, but we'd love the sail not to be like so full or so flat in one area. We'd like the maximum fullness to be in the middle. We want the bottom to transition to that nicely, and we want the top to be quite dynamic, like Al was talking about with the cloth, because we're asking it to do a lot of things. We're if we go to Regatta and we've got one sail, we need this sail to really not have a weak wind zone. In other words, it's easy to make a sail faster in really light air, or faster in really heavy air, or something like that. But when we go to a big regatta, we don't know, right? We've got to be pretty quick in every wind strength, right? So we want it to be dynamic. We want it to be able to go in the light air. We want it to be able to go fast in flat water. And we want it to be able to flatten out and twist open when it's windy, and keep us on our feet. So we really think we got that with the sail. And part of that was like Al said, the second batten. It was just so long. I mean, it was like, the thing came like that far from the mast. Well, that's not where we want the draft in light air when we're trying to get the flow at the top, and we have to ease the sheet a little bit. We want it to be back. We want a more smooth, even shape in the sail, not so knuckle forward. So I think that was really nice. And then just, a bunch of little things, a bunch of little details here and there, which made it a little nicer sail overall.
Yeah, I mean, I think that was kind of what you're talking about, that zone of sailing where you're looking for power. is where that batten really came into play, because where we're trying to get the boat powered up, we almost had to oversheet to get the draft to move proper position. So sail just wasn't really willing to power up in that kind of wind zone, basically. And it made a massive difference. We were just sitting on the dock watching someone sail by, actually. And I remember you and I being like, wow, that batten's really just too long. And I didn't notice it from on the boat. You didn't notice it even from the coach boat. We were sitting on shore and we're like, well, wow, we need to change that right away. And as soon as we did that, the sail, became
more dynamic in the head section.
Absolutely. And the best part is it's actually, in some regards, I think it's faster downwind for sure. And I think it's no slower when it's windy. I think it was actually one of the most important changes we made, in my opinion, other than the cloth. It was a pretty important change. So thank you for that question, Tim. So speaking of
one more question.
Do we have one more question?
Yes. At what point do you consider using the rocket sail rather than the Z-Max? The rocket sail is a little more of an uprange sail, or if you're a little lighter, I think what's the optimum weight on the boat, between 200 and what do you call it, Al? 280 or something like that.
Probably. Yep.
280. And I go to some of these regattas and I see a lot of guys sailing by themselves and they're only 160 or 180. And I'm like, wow, you're going to have a problem in the breeze. So they kind of should be using the rocket sail all the time. It's a little flatter. Or if you go someplace that you just know is going to be windy, it's not a bad sail downrange, it might suffer in a little bit of lump. But if you're lighter, it'll be okay. But
and the sail, to me, my biggest takeaway from using it, and I used it last year in Sarasota, and it blew 14 knots, and I was super quick with that sail. My actual big takeaway was the head was flatter, but so I could kind of ease the sheet and keep all the power down low, and the head kind of just twisted open a little more. So it didn't heel. So for the lighter guys, I think that's a pretty big advantage. I think that sail has a big shell foot on it. It's pretty powerful at the bottom, but you can sail actually traveler down and sheet on, and the top is really flat, so it kind of opened its way out there, and it seemed pretty nice. So, but I agree with you. For the lighter guys, I think if they're sailing, you can use that sail full time. I don't think there's, especially if you're under 200 pounds, I think that's a great sail for that. I think it's really good. Yeah. So, all right. Well, here we'll go to that right now. Speaking of that, Eric and I are happy to talk about that. We have 15% off here through the end of this month, and we're psyched about these new sales, and we really want to thank all of you who've stuck with us this year already and are psyched about the new sales that they've. I know we've gotten a lot of results, and a lot of people are using them across the country, and they're happy. We've got folks in Jersey and Iowa and Wisconsin and everywhere in between using the sales, and they're just super happy. And I know Eric and I are thrilled to be able to support you guys. We're glad for all the support you've given us as we've gone through this adventure. It's been super fun for both of us. I know that. And, we're excited to see what's on the drawing board here and kind of keep working on it. So,
got a few ideas. We'll keep trying them out and keep improving.
Absolutely.
And, now's the time. If you want to get a little discount, a little Christmas discount.
Exactly. And we can get you sales for the stuff in use this year. So, give us a call and we're ready to help you out. And, with that, thank you, Eric, for your insights tonight. And I know you're not going to be with us at the next regatta. So we hope I think you're Etcheling maybe, but we hope to see it.
Yep.
And
all right, we'll do what we can. Yep.
Yeah. And for all of you who are going to use this, send me a note. We're talking about doing a practice on Friday, pre-racing, and I'll hop in a motorboat and do some practice races and starts and things like that. So if you're interested, shoot me a note and we'd be glad to put that together and help people out and do that. But on behalf of me and Eric, thank you guys for tuning in tonight. And we really appreciate it. And we'll see you on the water and enjoy the rest of your fall. Thank you.
See you, Al. See you, everybody.
Thanks, Eric.